Welcome to this next episode of YouTube, where we have two words that nobody wants to hear, and that is heat advisory, especially for wolves late in the summer. And the reason why it's more problematic late in the summer is they are growing back their winter coats, and so when we get heat and humidity, it becomes real problematic, and that's really what we've had this last week. We had a very beautiful summer, relatively cool, even into early August. We had frost advisories. Late July we had a frost advisory. And then this last week of August hits, and we are in the 90s, and it's just miserably hot for the wolves. So we are certainly keeping an eye on that. The younger wolves have less troubles than the older wolves. We're keeping water in the ponds. We're dealing with algae issues. Things that are usually problematic in July are now becoming problematic in late August. And so that's a challenge for us. We are also feeding some frozen bone dust, and you might see that around on the rocks. Some very high bone concentration, bone dust, especially to maximize Luna's calcium. And as you can see here, she's definitely very mobile. She's been doing a lot more climbing since we started the new joint supplement. I think she feels a lot better. Although there are days when it's hot that she gets a little cranky, and that we do see with Luna and Bolt. But what's interesting in these clips here is Bolt seems to be doing some food begging, puts his nose right in Luna's mouth, and showing some very subordinate posture to Luna. So eventually, as these two mature to adults, Luna is no longer going to be the wrestling partner pup mate that she has been through Bolt's life. She's going to become that dominant female that he defers to. And even though they still have their moments of wrestling and bouts of jaw sparring and things like you're seeing here, we are going to see a little bit more probably authority and a little bit more respect towards Luna. So Bolts gives a submissive jab. And again, even though the fact that he is still jaw sparring with her, his ears are in a submissive posture, and he's below her, and that means something to the effect of being a little bit subordinate in interactions with her. Now, of course, hot weather makes everybody cranky, so sometimes you can interpret dominance for just being, hot and humid and cranky. So we are kind of taking a look on that. And since the last posting where we had Aiden and Bolts in some fairly intense dominance, and Aiden putting Bolts in his place, we've seen a complete turnaround in the male rank order. Much more social behavior. This is actually Denali and Aiden doing a parallel gait there for a while, licking each other, socially greeting. This is Bolts coming over and being subordinate to Aiden. Again, a lot more social behavior this week. So that ritualized rank order that I talked about last week is not fighting. It's just establishing position so everybody knows their place. And once everybody knows their place, it's a lot calmer. And the other thing that we did notice was that Bolts did one of his first scraping after urinations as an adult in the pen. Of course, maybe he's done it before and we just didn't see it, but this is the first one we've witnessed, and that makes that's a status sign for Bolts, and he was pretty excited about it. So in the heat, what do you do when you're grizzler by yourself over there? You get a lot of subordinate rollover on your back, belly rubs, and making sure that you expose that area of your belly to an airflow. And he actually stays cooler than anybody. He's got the best shade. He's got obviously many opportunities to be on his back in the cool dirt, kind of cooling themselves off. In the main pack, when you've got other wolves, you can't lay around with your legs sprawled without somebody jumping on you. So Grizzler does have a lot of opportunities for that, does rest on his back quite a bit in that open sprawl, which is probably the coolest way to enjoy a hot, humid day. So that's what's going on in Grizzler's world. And then in retirement, obviously, we work really hard on trying to make sure that we have good cover, and the wolves appreciate it. Malik, under a very dense cover here that helps not only with the flies and the heat, but also gives a good vantage point to kind of watch things without being the main focus. We've been not filling the ponds in retirement as much because we've been, now that it's hot and humid this late in the year, we want to clean them more frequently. So we're only doing half full to make it a little bit easier or less, volume to clean. Most of what they're doing is kind of spending their time in a cool area. You may see them on the camera quite a bit on the top of the den. We do try to make sure that we have a good cover on top of the den for them to physically have some cushioning for those older bones, and we will try to wet things down several times a day to cool them off. But this is typically where Malik finds himself under that vegetative cover there. And again, Shadow has a tendency to be a little bit more problems with the heat. It's just his physiology. He doesn't do as well with the heat, so we watch him a little bit closer to make sure that he's maintaining that he's panting, which is a cooling response. If he does stop panting or doesn't show the alertness that he typically does, we're going to obviously be very concerned about that. But he's still doing pretty well. And like I said, with the humidity and heat comes the flies, and so you'll notice their ears are pretty well coated still with fly ointment. We put another dose on earlier this week, trying to avoid harassing them multiple times a day with spray. We're just taking fly off cream and just coating their ears, which makes that black kind of gooey look on their ears. And hopefully as fall progresses, we'll be able to comb some of that out of there and get rid of some of that fly ointment. But like I said, the wood chips, that's the function of the wood chips. Is he's got an older bones, and laying on concrete is not good for him. So we try to give him a pretty soft cushion where he can lie down. And he does. He does like that a little bit. And when we wet it down, it holds moisture and it stays very cool for him. Obviously, the howling issue is still something that we're witnessing. And we do see a tendency that this hoarseness in his voice may be related to humidity. He seems to howl just fine on cool mornings when we have very low humidity and cool temperatures. But these hot, humid days, he doesn't seem to be able to get his vocal cords to work right. So again, I didn't film too much of this, but Shadow does like to howl, and it's just a struggle to try to get something to come out. But he does still manage to find time to cool himself off. He likes splashing in the water, and you can see here, not too deep. These ponds are about 3.5 feet deep. And they get cranky a little bit as well. So every once in a while, come out of a race around the pond, or come out of some splashing in the pond and do a little bit of standoff with Malik, and then back to that dominant behavior of following, which we don't see all that much in the exhibit pack. But in retirement, following means that you're more dominant, you're intimidating the wolf that you're following, and that's a tactic that Shadow uses. So that's it for this week's YouTube. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
See ya.